Covering more than 70% of the Earth's surface, the oceans provide the largest environment for life that we know of. But we've only begun to scratch the surface in our quest to learn what lies beneath the waves. What we do know is that things begin to get particularly strange at extreme depths, where not even light is able to reach. This pitch-black world with extreme pressures and chilling temperatures is home to some of the most bizarre creatures in nature, each of which has had to adapt in clever ways to their challenging surroundings. I'm Jordan Ferguson, and this is See It First. Join me as we explore one of the most mysterious places on our planet. We'll delve past 1,000 meters, over 600 miles beneath the waves. Discover the incredible creatures that make it their home, and reveal the science behind survival in the midnight zone. The ocean below is divided into 4 main zones based on their depth. The very top layer is called the epipelagic. Then there's the mesopelagic, bathypelagic, abyssopelagic, and finally the hadal zone. But it's this third one, the bathypelagic, that's also known as the midnight zone, a region in the ocean that begins at a depth of around 1,000 meters and goes all the way down to 4,000, 2.5 miles down. Most of it is empty, a dark expanse of water still vastly unexplored. It's the first region of the ocean that is completely devoid of natural sunlight. By the time you get to the depths of the bathypelagic region, it's simply too far for any wavelength to reach. This is significant not just because you can't see anything, but because photosynthesis is no longer possible. Plant life forms the basis of every food chain that we rely upon, but deep down in the ocean, things have to work differently. The temperature here settles into a near constant chill, hovering around 4 degrees centigrade. Pressure builds quickly. By 1,000 meters, you're at roughly 100 times the pressure at the surface. As you can imagine, it's an incredibly difficult place for us to explore. The chance of encountering creatures during an expedition are rare, and it becomes even trickier to study them because of how delicate they are. Bodies built for that kind of pressure easily rupture when brought to the surface without great care. This is why it's one of the least known places on the Earth, but also why it's one of the most fascinating. The reason why it's so dark in the lower regions of the ocean is because of how light interacts with water molecules. Water absorbs light relatively easily, particularly the elements of light that have longer wavelengths. Infrared and colors like red and orange are removed fairly quickly, with the shorter wavelength colors like blue reaching the deepest. It's why our oceans are so blue in color. The molecules in the water also scatter the light in different directions, and impurities in the water like minerals increase this effect. Were ocean water to become completely pure, then light would travel a lot deeper. The limit is around 1,000 meters. This matters for the ocean's ecosystems because radiation from the sun is crucial to every element of life. It provides light which allows us to see our surroundings, warmth which our bodies need to function properly, and it's how plants produce food for themselves, while at the same time converting carbon dioxide into oxygen. For a long time, the scientific world believed that sunlight was an absolute necessity for life. But as we've learned more about the depths of the ocean, it's clear this isn't the case. To make up for the lack of sunlight, organisms have had to adapt in some very clever ways in order to survive. Creatures have become far more reliant on other senses. Food sources are scarce, so there are many species that depend on material to fall down from higher up in the ocean. Some can survive for extended periods of time without eating at all, while others have evolved to become efficient and deadly hunters. There are even those that have developed chemosynthesis, where organisms harvest chemicals that are released from volcanic activity. Another fascinating development in a place where there's no natural light is that animals have ways to create light of their own. Bioluminescence is one of the cleverest ways that animals have overcome the lack of light in the deep ocean. It's thought that between 75 and 90% of deep-sea creatures have this ability to some degree, and they use it for everything from lighting their way to luring prey in. Even in the darkest place on Earth, life forms continue to rely on light for their ongoing survival. When a molecule called luciferin is combined with an enzyme called luciferase, this causes a reaction, and one of the results is the creation of a photon of light. What's even more unusual is that quite often, it's not even the animal itself that's responsible for the process. Anglerfish, for example, have symbiotic bacteria that live inside their bodies, and it's these that create the bioluminescence. Researchers are continually discovering new species that create light. It can be present in virtually any body part, from a lure to cells along the sides, underneath the stomach, around the mouth, or at the tip of a tentacle. Some even produce a bioluminescent fluid that they release to create a cloud of light in the water around them. Far from being random, each faint flicker beneath the waves is purposeful. While the chemical process of creating light is similar across all species, the way that it's used varies dramatically. There are 4 different main uses for bioluminescence in the Midnight Zone: defense, camouflage, hunting, and reproduction. Depending on whether you're a predator looking for a live meal, a small creature needing to make a quick getaway, or simply looking for a mate. The ability to create your own light is an extraordinary advantage. A major challenge creatures face over 1,000 meters down is pressure. At sea level, we experience 1 atmosphere of pressure, which comes from the amount of atmosphere above us that's pushing down. We aren't aware of it because our bodies have developed in a way that means they are able to push outward with the same force. Water is much denser and heavier, so for every 10 meters you go down, 1 extra atmosphere of pressure is added. You'll know from diving deep in a swimming pool that you begin to feel a tightness around your body and pressure in your ears, and that is just from 1 meter or 2 of depth. By the time you reach the bathypelagic zone at 1,000 meters to 4, the pressure becomes between 100 and 400 atmospheres. Human bodies simply cannot maintain their form in these conditions. The only way for us to safely travel to the region is by surrounding ourselves with vehicles that are built to hold back the pressure and create a safe environment inside. That itself is a massive engineering challenge. Only a handful of submarines have ever been built that can go to these depths. The deepest anyone has ever successfully dived without a submarine is just over 332 meters, which is less than a third of the distance to the midnight zone. Animals that call this place home are able to handle the pressure by having different body structures to our own. Whales are a great example of this. The deepest diving mammal of all is a species of whale called Cuvier's beaked whale. They've been recorded at a depth of almost 3,000 meters, which is well into the midnight zone. They breathe out all of the air from their lungs before they dive, and their ribs are held in place by loose and bendy cartilage. This allows their rib cages and lungs to collapse under the high pressure without risk of breaking. And to further reduce their reliance on oxygen, most of their organs shut down. Blood flows only to the brain, heart, and muscles. For species that permanently live at depth, other adaptations are needed, such as having gelatinous bodies and the presence of unusual molecules that increase their internal pressure to match the external forces. Every living organism on Earth needs food in some form, from the smallest amoebas to plants to mammals. It's how we receive nutrients to fuel the processes in our cells, to provide energy, repair damage, and much more. Fortunately for us at the surface, there's plenty of ways that we can get this. But things in the deep ocean are very different. It's a place where there's little plant life and relatively small population numbers of any species that might live there. This means that food sources can be rare to come across. Most species in this region rely on marine snow, which is material that sinks down to the depths from higher up, made from plant matter, plankton, and other types of material that clump together. It's still quite rare, with estimates suggesting it's the equivalent to around a sugar cube of material per square meter on the ocean floor. There are other opportunities available, however. These include hydrothermal vents, where some species feed off the chemicals and create the basis for food chains. And food falls, where something large like a whale carcass or lump of wood becomes a much-needed source of nutrition. The unpredictability of food means that animals in the midnight zone have to prepare to go for a long time without anything. To do this, they are all cold-blooded and will usually have extremely slow metabolisms. As a result, they use far less energy than we do. Many are opportunistic feeders. They will gorge themselves on food when it's available and have the ability to grow quickly so they have room to store all of the nutrients. With all these adaptations, there are some species, such as the giant isopods, that are believed to be able to go for as long as 5 years without eating anything at all. With a dark environment, low population numbers, and an endless expanse of nothingness, you may think it was virtually impossible for predators to sustain themselves. Nature always seems to find a way, and this region has seen some of the most ingenious adaptations you'll find anywhere on the planet. On land, being a predator is a hugely energy-intensive existence. If you think of lions and the amount of exertion that's needed to catch prey, it soon becomes clear why they need to have such a rich diet. But this isn't a feasible approach in the depths of the ocean. because failure to catch a meal after such effort would almost certainly be fatal. Instead, predators adopt an energy-efficient approach and are usually sit-and-wait hunters. This means they'll stay in one general place and be patient. Eventually, prey will pass by or be attracted towards them. Still, opportunities are few and far between, so predators in this part of the ocean will usually have features like a large mouth, long teeth, and expandable stomachs. So when they do get their chance, the odds of them successfully catching a meal are significantly increased. And once they've eaten as much as they can, they'll have the energy to bide their time before needing to do it again. Probably the most famous of all deep-sea creatures is the anglerfish. Dark-colored, to blend in with their surroundings, they have huge, wide mouths with the teeth pointed inwards, so food can easily pass into the stomach, but will become caught if it tries to escape. They have thin bones and are extremely flexible, able to withstand the immense pressures of the deep. But it also gives them the ability to swallow prey whole, that's as much as twice the size of their bodies. What they're best known for is the special adaptation on the foremost dorsal fin. At the very tip is something called elysium. And in deep-sea anglerfish, this is where bioluminescent bacteria are held. Other animals are drawn towards this beacon of light straight into the path of the anglerfish's mouth. Another terrifying predator of the midnight zone is the dragonfish. There are hundreds of species that can be found in the ocean, but the ones that have adapted to life in darkness are particularly effective. It's an example of a species that can produce their own light instead of relying on bacteria, and will often have light-producing photophores along the length of their bodies. With large heads and huge mouths lined with fangs, they will flash their lights in a way that attracts prey. Some types of dragonfish can also produce red light, which gives a secondary advantage. As red light is so rare at depth, many species are red in color to avoid being seen. By using their own red light, dragonfish can see all of these animals and render their camouflage useless. One of the biggest users of energy for any animals are muscles. They're vital for moving around our environment, but in the ocean there's an alternative that can drastically reduce how much nutrition is needed. Known as drifters, there are a number of species that have bodies designed to simply float through the water. To do this, they have neutral buoyancy, so don't sink or float, and will rely on pieces of debris being caught in their hairs or tentacles. Deep-sea jellyfish are great at doing this, but the giant siphonophore is by far the most unusual. Growing up to more than 40 meters, longer than a blue whale, they're a perfect example of adaptation in this environment. Instead of being one single organism, siphonophores are colonies made up of many thousands of individuals. Normally found in the upper regions of the midnight zone, each member of the colony takes up a specific role so that they all work together towards a common goal. They are arranged along a stalk-like structure, with some providing rigidity, others pulsing it to encourage motion, and some that will be responsible for digesting anything that's caught in the tentacles. Solely adapted for deep-sea environments and relying on the pressure to hold them together. Any time one has been brought to the surface, it bursts. So none have ever been thoroughly studied. The only way we know of their existence is by deep-sea exploration and witnessing them in their natural habitat. The biological prerogative of every species is procreation. Across the animal kingdom, there are fantastic displays and bizarre rituals that are all designed to find a mate. But how do things work in the Midnight Zone, where there are so few animals in the first place? This is a major problem for all the species that live there, and each one has its own solution. Some, like the Greenland shark, will have extremely long lifespans of hundreds of years and only intend on reproducing every decade or so. Others, like cephalopods, will use their bioluminescence to signal across the ocean that they're looking for a mate, with the hope that there's another one out there. It's often easy to look at the Midnight Zone as a region that relies heavily on the ocean above, and that this is a one-way process. But the more that researchers have studied the different layers of the ocean, the more that a complex connection has become clear. As it turns out, it's a hugely important region for carbon recycling, where marine snow falls down and supports deep-sea life. It's also where a large number of deep-sea vents are found, which alter the balance of the whole ocean's chemistry because of the way that currents mix it across the globe. The biggest connection with the rest of the ocean comes from a process known as diel vertical migration. There are plenty of species that will spend their entire lives in complete darkness of the Midnight Zone, but this refers to those that move between layers. Some creatures will swim up to the surface, usually at nighttime, before returning to the depths during the day. The benefit of this is that there are plenty more sources of food for them to take advantage of in the shallower waters above. It's the final tactic that animals can employ to survive in such a barren environment, and helps to move nutrition back to the surface and support higher numbers of prey species for deeper predators to hunt. The lack of light, the pressure, and the temperature means that the Midnight Zone is one of the most inaccessible regions on our planet. Very few submersibles exist that can reach these depths. So the things that we know are all based on what's been directly observed by research missions. But as technology and funding improves, we're able to take further glimpses into the darkness. And with new species being discovered on a regular basis, we're beginning to find that it's a far more active place than had previously been imagined. We simply don't know how many species are down there, how large they might be, or if there are any monsters still waiting to be discovered. With such little food available, every species had had to develop its own unique ways of surviving. From unusual colors and escape mechanisms to ingenious methods of hunting and tracking down prey. What may seem to us to be monstrous design is, in fact, an incredible example of adaptivity to the constraints, and may even provide evidence about how life could exist on other worlds.